On February 27, 2023, when I was at my main residence, a friend sent me an email, and he sent 3 images. The images were taken with a wireless phone, and they were not taken with a nice camera, which would have offered nicer views. Yet the images made it clear that I had a problem to deal with sometime in the future. For example, this image shows that I had a downed big tree because of a recent high windstorm at the secondary place at which I lived. Really, the sent images showed that I had several trees down. The big tree, the biggest of the group, was in the backyard. I then wondered if it had ruined a 7-foot lighthouse and a swing in the backyard. By the way, the lighthouse was something that someone had made some years earlier in a way that made it not weather resistant, so I had redone much of it, such as with treated lumber and aluminum sheet. While I looked at the images of the damaged big tree, I was aware that I only had 2 chainsaws at the secondary location. One was an electric saw, which would be no use in cutting down or cutting up the big tree and the other trees. For example, it only had a 9-inch bar, the actual usable part. I could do some work on trees with it, and I had used it to cut limbs, such as at the primary location in the past. The electric saw was operated by electricity from a power cord and not a battery. The other chainsaw that I had was a Stihl 017. It was purchased in the middle of the 1990s, and it only had a 13-inch bar, or really, it only had a 13-inch usable section. I was well aware that the saw, which was in good shape, was not a tough enough tool to take apart the big tree. A few days later, I went to a store and bought a new Stihl chainsaw, and it was a Stihl MS 261 C-M, and it had an 18-inch bar. That was the defined length of the bar and the usable length. I was yet at the primary location, which was about 270 miles away from the secondary residence. In addition, before I would work on the big tree, I picked up additional chainsaw chains, giving me 4, and a chainsaw chain sharpening set designed for the chainsaw. It was not till March 3, 2023, when I could really see well the downed big tree in person and take photographs of it. I noticed that the tree had missed the windmill in the backyard, but I had been aware of that, and the tree had missed the swing, and the tree had missed the lighthouse mostly. The top of the lighthouse had been clipped a bit by some branches, and, for example, a weather vane-like thing had been knocked off. At least the main structure of the lighthouse was undamaged. In July 2023, I would remake the roof section of the lighthouse, finally replacing bad work that had been done by the original maker. The swing had gotten hit by some debris, but it was in excellent shape. When the work to take down the tree would begin, the swing would be moved out of the way. If it were not moved, it might get damaged. A neighbor, a former Army Ranger of the 1960s, had seen the tree in person before I did, and he reported that it would be no problem to take down the tree, and I trusted his judgment, since, although retired, he regularly took down trees in the neighborhood-like area. He was going to help me take down the tree using a dropping technique that he had learned back in about 1954. In the very recent past, I had done car repair work for him, such as change speakers in a car, change a water pump in a car, and redo brake line and brake systems. I had tools that could be used to remove the tree, such as an axe, a wagon, a handsaw, a hand sledge, and a floor jack, but the neighbor was going to bring some tools that I did not have, such as wedges and a come-along. I show this photograph. It shows the tree was hung up in some other trees. I would later determine that the tree was about 95 feet tall. At the base, above the tree ball proper, the diameter was about 32 inches. With this photograph, I go back in time more. It is the fall of 2013. Here, the newly renovated lighthouse is shown on the day that it was set in place. To the right is the tree that would fall in 2023. The photograph is the only one that I have of the tree in recent years. Notice the tree lost lower branches, such as those below roof edge level, a long time ago. When I took photographs of the tree being cut up in 2023, I had no plans to make a video, but I did have plans to make a PDF-type document about the tree and I would. Here, on March 5, 2023, work was already underway to take down the tree. See if you can determine what the idea of removing the top half of a portion of the tree, or a little more than that, could lead to. And I will add that it would have been nice to have branches that were way down the trunk, since the ones that might touch the ground on a drop phase would have helped soften the fall of the end of the tree and would have supported it off the ground a bit. From this side view of the tree, you should be able to determine several sections have been set up for removal. Each section is about 15 inches long, and that dimension is about the maximum length of wood that can be used in the burning unit within the chimney for the house in which the former Army Ranger lived, which got heated by wood only. Here is yet another view of the base of the tree. You can see that the center wood was dark. It was rotted, or was nearly rotten wood, almost like wood affected by dry rot. I state that roughly the plot was to remove each section in 4 quarters, but that was not a perfect set of quarters. For each section, the top set of 2 were usually bigger than the bottom set of 2. Using the Stihl chainsaw carefully, the former Army Ranger cut down the center of the 3 sections of trunk. Really, only 2 sections were under consideration right now, the upper 2 sections, and you will see, really, only the upper 2 quarters pertaining to the upper 2 sections would be removed before the end of the tree would be dropped to the ground. Look carefully. A 1/4-inch steel cable was wrapped around the trunk of the tree, and the line went off out into the distance, and the cable was associated with a come-along which had the other end connected to a good standing tree out in the distance. Using an undercutting technique mostly, cutting up from basically the ground, the former Army Ranger was able to drop the tree to the ground for the first time. Notice that the bottom 2 quarters were left in place in this case, since it was the first phase of getting the tree proper removed from the tree ball. In the future, only 1 bottom quarter would remain each drop time. By the way, only once during the process to bring down the tree did the tree sort of catch the chainsaw bar. I jump to the next day, March 6, 2023, and I show a situation in which 1/4 of the top section was left on the trunk after the 2 bottom quarter parts had been taken off the tree, using an undercutting technique at the joint between the upper section quarter and the remaining quarter of the middle section, or the remaining quarter of the middle section yet attached to the lower quarter. Incidentally, one purpose of taking off roughly 3 sections at a time was so that we could control the drop by not dropping too much at a time. Notice the control cable system was being used, and notice really the stub that was left was really a little less than half the diameter of the tree trunk. At this time, the end of the trunk was now near the lighthouse. I have to report that the lighthouse had to be left in place since it was frozen to the ground, or really 2 bricks that had been set underneath the lighthouse. The base of the lighthouse was made of man-made decking material, which cannot rot, and the decking material was screwed into a piece of foundation-grade plywood with stainless steel screws. The foundation-grade plywood was above the decking material and set up the shape of the base of the lighthouse. After each of the 3 sections was removed, the tree ended up more upright. I was moving away blocks of wood and debris, and for instance, I was loading quarters of the tree trunk into a vehicle. When the vehicle was full, we took the material over to the former Army Ranger's residence. In addition, I did the maintenance and service work on the saw, such as making sure the chain tension was proper. By leaving the 1/4 piece of wood on the tree trunk, the former Army Ranger was able to cut and not worry about catching the chainsaw bar in the ground. Sections being worked on were up in the air a bit. For instance, you should see that here, the former Army Ranger, while making the lengthwise cut down the center of the next 3 sections, did not have to worry about hitting the ground with the chainsaw bar and chain. Now it is March 7, 2023. This tool is the come-along that was being used. Notice one end was anchored to a standing tree. The line that goes off to the right was attached to the defective tree. This is where the other end of the cable now was. Notice the tree was standing fairly straight up. We wanted to pull it back a bit. To do that, I put a floor jack under the tree and I jacked it up a bit. Then a 2x6 got pushed underneath the stubby part. A 2x8 could have been used, and a longer piece of board could have been used. The technique of pulling the tree from too straight up could have been done more than once in the whole process. There came a point when the tree could almost fall, or could be made to fall safely, and then the pulling cable and the come-along could be set aside or packed away. The tree is down in this image. What you cannot see is a wellhead area for the house. Before the job would begin, we saw that there was a chance that the tree might hit the wellhead area, so I had used a part of, in essence, a wood beam and some logs to make a shelter for the wellhead area. Even though the tree was down, the former Army Ranger yet took the tree apart in 15-inch chunks. Oh, the Ranger was yet dividing sections into parts, since the diameter of the tree was yet rather large. There came a point when the former Army Ranger simply cut off 15-inch sections in whole. This image gives you a chance to see my blocking structure for the wellhead unit. Here the blocking structure is shown, and there was not much left of the tree. Remember, I picked up 4 chainsaw chains. That was done so that on each day of work we would not have to stop work several times to sharpen a single chain that was being used. This is the root ball as it was on March 7, 2023, and a few weeks later I would take it out of the ground using mostly an axe. I would have to wait till the ground was not frozen to get it all out. Over the next few days I had other work to do. I had piles of debris, such as branches that got turned into kindling. Some of the crappy little stuff got burned in a pit at the former Army Ranger's residence. With the ground fairly soft, I could attack the root ball. I did come across evidence of frost. Actually, for a short time on a couple days, I did work on the root ball. I did some work each day till I felt I should not waste the time hacking away at frosted ground. Using a shovel and an axe, I removed the root ball, and in essence the main job of removing the tree was done. Another tool that I used was a rock hammer or a concrete hammer, and it was used to chop away at the dirt or the frosty dirt around roots. Here's a look at where the tree once stood for maybe 150 years, based on a rough count of the tree rings of the tree. Now I will report that the Stihl MS 261C-M did well. It did well against a tree that was hard pine, maybe some of the hardest pine that exists. Although I have shown Stihl-type chainsaws, I am not officially recommending Stihl. I simply have become accustomed to, for instance, handling Stihl-type saws, which are good saws, and the position of parts on such saws. A few weeks later, I attended a community garage sale, and I found this item for sale for $40. This pole saw is probably worth several $100s. It is a Stihl KM90 with a Stihl HT-KM attachment, which is the chain and bar section. The usable portion of the bar is 11 inches long. The saw is gas-operated and not battery-operated. I would not get a battery-operated machine because if I do not use it for a year or two, I do not want to worry about the battery going dead or my having to charge the battery up every so often. And I do not want everything that I have to be battery-operated as being pushed by bad people in the country, since the Chinese, who are communists and enslavists, control the battery market in the world, and they could screw up my ability to do work when it has to be done. This gas-based machine may come in handy someday. For now, I say to the former owner, the saw will have a good home. And here it is, May 8th, 2024, and this spot is where the tree was, and you can see grass and weeds and whatever. It looks like another tree is trying to take over the spot. See that yellow thing? No, that's just another dandelion. And that ends my show of some history of Michigan.